Welcome back. Now, it's easy to believe that medical malpractice or negligence only affects the poorest amongst us, and that those with access to Kenya's big and expensive private hospitals need not fear. Well, nothing could be further from the truth, as our next interview reveals. Dr Awino Oketch is a Kenyan working in the UK, where she is chair of the Centre for Gender Studies at the University of London. Events that would change her family forever began in December 2010, when her mother, Dolphine, a woman in her 60s, was diagnosed with the early stages of cervical cancer in Kisumu. She traveled to Nairobi for treatment at a private hospital, where it was agreed that her uterus would be removed. 4 days later, she was dead. Further investigations revealed that it was due to negligence. Her mother's intestines had been punctured during surgery, and when doctors allowed her to eat, the contents leaked into her bloodstream, poisoning and killing her. Worse still, the doctor's delayed response to her deteriorating condition meant that a critical window to save her life was lost. There began another brutal journey for the family to get answers. It has now been nearly 10 years since Dr. Oketch's mother died. She now joins us via Skype from the University of London. And good evening to you. And we are very sorry for your loss, Dr. Oketch. Perhaps you could take us back to the time when you were told that your mother had passed on. What specifically led you and your family to seek more answers?
Thank you very much for the invitation, Anne. So basically, what happened was that on the third day post-op, my mother began to experience difficulties in eating, and her health condition was increasing. When the doctor, to establish what was wrong, they eliminated the fact that there was a possible clot in the blood system. And after that, they kept on saying they did not know what was wrong. So she moved from HDU into ICU, and we told she had a bacterial infection. Up until the point that she died on December 15, 2010, they did not know the source of the bacterial infection. And it is that that led us to the process of seeking answers.
So now briefly take us through the process you went through once you decided you were going to file a malpractice suit. How long did that last? How much did it cost?
So this process began therefore in January 2011, and eventually as a family we made a decision to stop the process in September or October of 2016. One of the things that we had to do almost immediately was to get the medical files from the hospital, because while we had a sense that something had gone wrong, we needed to establish fully by consulting with the doctors whether there was actually a malpractice or a negligence case. So we consulted with medical doctors, and we found one doctor willing to offer an expert opinion. And that began the process then filing the case at the medical board, but we also simultaneously pursued a civil suit in the courts of law. In terms of cost, we spent in the region of about 700 to 800,000 Kenya shillings. That is legal fees, that is paying for doctors, transport, all of these things. But Anne, I can't understand that beyond the financial resources that we spent, emotional toil that this had on all of us is far outweighs the money that we spent.
Viewers may be looking at you here. You are, having a plush position, a position in London. You were able to take your mother for possibly what would be the best treatment available locally. Yet at the end of the day, yours doesn't end as a happy story. Your family decided to terminate, the action that they were pursuing. So if you couldn't get justice, what does that mean for the rest of us?
I know this is the question that everyone keeps on asking. And even when we decided to pursue this case, everyone kept on telling us, don't waste your time. But I think as a family, we felt it was important for us to make a point to the hospital and to the doctor that we would not let this go. Because there are too many cases of people who experience this kind of thing, and then they just walk away because they know that the system is not there to support them. I think one of the things that we can definitely begin to think about is to sort of build a process of what are they called, mass action suits, this collective suits allow people to put a case around a doctor or a hospital where there's been a record problems can be documented. Yeah.
Hold that line. We want to bring in Dr. Alan Ochanji now. He is the Vice Chair of the Kenya Medical Practitioners and Dentists Union. Dr. Ochanji, there's an interesting point of Dr. Oketch's story, Oketch's stories, I beg your pardon, that I would like you to bring in. And you have written about this extensively on a blog, and you talk about the fact that at the point that you were attending these meetings, it appeared to you that there had been some sort of collusion between the hospital and the medical board before whom you brought your matter. Could you tell us about that?
Incident that stands in mind. So eventually, after waiting for a significant amount of time, we got 2 hearings. In the first hearing with the board, we arrived there and we were told there would be no hearing because there's a court injunction that had been got by the hospital. The second hearing, we were able to establish, and remember, when there's a court injunction, we go to court and then the hospital doesn't show up. So then we set up a hearing, and when we went for the second hearing, we kept waiting outside to meet with the board for over 2 hours because, according to the CEO of the board, they were waiting for a court injunction that was about to be delivered. Now, this is the first time I ever heard of a situation where we actually have space to actually begin listening to the case, but we are waiting for some messenger who is arriving with a court injunction. Now, you cannot convince me that therein lies some kind of collusion, because they were stalling the process to allow the hospital process server to arrive in order for the matter not to proceed.
Dr. Ochanji, what can you say about that? Is it believable to you that the board on one hand would be waiting for a document in order to stall proceedings? Doesn't that speak of collusion between doctors, hospital, the board, against the patients and their families?
Again, sorry again for the experience. For the purposes of the general public, again, what happens is initially there were complaints about collusion, hospitals not cooperating, some doctors concealing information. And because of that, the CAP 254 that establishes the board was changed and amended. And right now we have representation in the board. It's now called the Council. We have representation of the Kenya National Commission of Human Rights. So that it's not about being constituted entirely by doctors. We have independent bodies there that are able to voice the concern of a patient. So it's not a board made up of completely doctors. And if an institution is not cooperating, then the patient or the victim here has a right to petition the board and get the fairest hearing possible. And beyond the board, there are laws of the land that governs all these things. So the patient should not be able, should not feel that the rights are taken away, there's collusion. They should go to the extent of getting their full information.
Okay. Dr. Ochanji, do you believe that as a union, and you are one of the most powerful unions in the country, that you have a duty to expose those in your rank and file who are letting the profession down?
Let me say this, that in any medical school, there's no doctor who is trained to do bad. Of course, bad things happen, and it's very unfortunate. Like in this case, we're dealing with Dr. Awino's case. But when things go wrong, then we must sit back and ask hard questions that what really happened. And there comes in a case where once you have a case, once you have an happening, the best way to go about is the doctor should walk the family or the aggrieved person step by step.
But I'm talking about you as a union, because you know your membership. Doctors know doctors. The same way journalists know journalists.
We have
do you believe that you should be the first port of call to expose those who are members of your union, who are known amongst your own fraternity to be doing wrong, to be having some sort of malpractice, to be cutting corners, etc.? Do Kenyans need to wait for a disaster to happen to go through the process, or should you be more proactive?
As a union, we don't condone malpractice. In fact, we have an internal way of doing investigation. And the other thing we do every year, before you're given a license, you must go through some form of continuous professional education, so that by the time you're given that license, you're able and qualified to practice. Now, the reason as to why the board exists is so that individuals, they vary. There might be those among us that do not hold high in terms of ethics. That's why the board has been instituted independently to deal with those cases where an individual may go out of the way, out of the practice of science, out of the laid down procedures, so that they go out of their way.
Dr. Awino, my final question goes to you, and first I want to know whether you are satisfied with what you've heard from the Doctors Union, and finally, what do you want Kenyans, what do you want the hospital responsible, what do you want the doctor responsible to know about your mom?
I think that Terry is responding from a very technical perspective, right? So there's mechanisms that have been set up to sort of deal with any kinds of biases that might affect the ways in which the board operates. But let's remember that institutions are serviced by human beings. And I think this is the challenge that the board has not been able to effectively address. So the expansion of seats on the board and all of these things does not flow into the procedural aspects of the ways in which the board operates, including the length of time to actually get a hearing on any particular matter. The thing that I would like to urge Kenyans, and I really want to emphasize this idea about class action suits, because it deals with the question of finances and class dynamics that sort of impact people's ability to take up these matters, is that we cannot continue to allow our health institutions and our doctors to get away with these kinds of issues, particularly when, one, you're paying a lot of money, two, you have people who you care for and love who are being treated as though they're just bad numbers. They're just an insurance payout that's coming at the end of their treatment. And really, this is my core message, both to the hospital and to the doctor who treated my mother, that I really do hope that this never happens to you or anyone that you care about. And I think it's really important for people, for doctors in particular, to remember why they went into the profession. It's about a service to humanity. And if the very, very idea of being humane to people, to the family of somebody who's gone, who has been snatched away from them before their time, and you cannot show up for a meeting, you cannot say sorry, then you have no business being a doctor in the first place.
Dr. Oketch, we're so sorry for your loss, for the loss of your family. I want to also thank Dr. Chanji for joining us. We've got more after this. Stay with us.